just going to skip around the room with who's in the room today. And so, as I said to you before, my name is Karen Shepherd. I work for the Institute of Teaching and Learning Innovation. It's the central teaching and learning organisation that supports tutors and teachers from across the university. I play in lots of spaces, some very interesting ones, learning spaces, peer observation, and a lot of space in professional learnings, which is where I am here today with you. And I'm just going to pass you over to my colleague who will quickly introduce himself, and then we'll work around the room. Peter.
Hello everybody, I'm Peter Rutherford. I too am a learning designer working in Italy, part of Karen's team, and again, the areas that I work in is quite broad as well, but basically I focus on assessment and academic integrity, professional learning, and teacher recognition, I guess.
And you also pop up in tutors at UQ.
I do, on occasion.
Just in the room, just hands up, how many people have done or completed tutors at UQ? Yeah, Lisa.
Lisa has. Natalie.
Anybody? Can you put your little, if you're just on a tile, just put your hand up or say yes in chat, perhaps. Okay, if you are new to tutoring and you haven't heard of it, if you're brand new to tutoring in your school and you haven't heard about it, then please go and see your school admin. Because you are entitled to 5 hours of professional learning, paid professional learning, as opposed to voluntary, like we are here today. So please access that if you're brand new, because it's part of the university's commitment to professional learning for tutors. Okay, so next, just around the room, Hui, you just want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Hui. I've been a tutor in BC School for a few years, but mostly in data analytics course. Nice to meet you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. My name's Lisa. I am a tutor over in HAST, and I tutor across communication and arts and also social sciences as well. And I do everything from first years through to postgraduates in a master's course as well. So, yeah, at the moment, mostly teaching across digital cultures, and yeah, I've been tutoring here for a couple of years now, I think. Yeah.
Yusra?
Hi, I'm Yusra, and I tutor at the School of Chemistry, SPMB. Sciences, hardcore labs, experiments, and some workshops as well. Tutor second year students who are pursuing their chemistry degree. Yep. I'll talk a bit more about what I do later as well.
Thank you. And Natalie?
Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie. I teach within the School of Social Science, specifically the criminology discipline. A lot of my courses tend to discuss sort of themes of crime, race, and gender and how they interact, and particularly sort of structural issues as well. So I'm really excited to be here to chat to you all today.
So, and we are very excited to have you people come in to join us today. So again, it's going to be reasonably free-flowing, but what's going to happen is that each of our tutors are going to talk about their practices. There might be an opportunity for a quick question after they finish, and then at the end we can have further questions after that. And I'm going to skip that. Okay. Where are you ready?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Yes.
Would you want me to start?
Yes, you may start. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Honored to be here. Happy to discuss and basically have a chat with you and get to also learn with other good and experienced tutors regarding their good and best practices. For me personally, even though those a few approaches that are listed over here, I think what I would want to focus is that tutors need to genuinely care for students and for the learning experience from the student's perspective. So I'm guessing what my personal experience is, I would normally put student at the center, students learning outcome oriented. That's how I see my experience of the past 5 years. I think as a tutor or teaching or teacher, that at some point you will notice there are some challenges and things that not delivering what we want to deliver to the students. So at that point, we will need to think about, is there anything we could do to help with the situation? Is there anything we could help students to succeed and to basically grasp the content? As I briefly mentioned before, I mainly came across in data analytics, business insights courses that could be sometimes a little bit technical, especially in business school, where not all students come from a technical background. So what I noticed in the beginning is that, okay, students come from commerce, from finance, from accounting. It's not always easy for them to step straight to understand the database or data analytics concept. So what I normally do is, understanding their prior knowledge using some real life examples or data sets from let's say from finance, from commerce, to help them understand the concept in those technical courses. That's how I see my approach to help with a diverse needs from the students. Karen, would you mind go to the next page? Thank you. And those specific examples could be very different from different schools for sure. For me, because over the last several years, there were online tutorials. Now we switched back to offline, to on-campus mode. There could be various challenges with how to engage students, how to promote or motivate the collaboration between the tutors and the students. What I sometimes would do is using shared online documents. It could be similar to the MS form that we just used a few minutes ago, that we could get a real-time response from the students. So by having a, let's say, Google Doc, or OneDrive doc online, I put in some questions over there, some tutorial tasks over there, and then students could type in their answers, their notes, or their questions regarding how to complete those tasks. And then I could respond to those like real time. And by the end of each session, these tutorial cohorts, they will get their own versions of basically a collaborative note after each tutorial session, basically as a takeaway after tutorial. And that seems to be very, I think, very good, or at least positively feedback from the students. Another thing is I would always want to increase the confidence of the students. So starting with easy examples, or decompose complex tasks into smaller set of tasks that could help them build up the confidence levels. And there's an example that I use. Karen, would you mind click on the slides? There should be a pop-up. Yes. So for example, because we are analyzing data as a core concept in those courses, sometimes I would use a visualization to help them understand, okay, this could be a good way. But for sure, in different courses, different schools, there will be different techniques. For me, this works there are visual learners, and this could easily tell them, okay, what could we do? What could we deliver if we do a proper job of analyzing data or visualizing the data by displaying a simple example like this? That seems to be at least motivating students a little bit during the tutorials. I think that's all for me. Any questions? Anything that you want to ask or discuss? Feel free to let me know. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hui. So the way we can do this is you can ask a question now. You can unmute and jump in, or else you can pop something in the chat if you've got a particular question. Just give you a second there. While you're doing that,
Sure.
I just noted that you talked right at the beginning. You talked about this learner-centered education, this learner-centered focus within your tutorials.
Yeah.
Is there anything you do? I mean, other than obviously the lovely, like the documents and scaffolding and the chunking. Is there anything else that you have how you work with your students that kind of bring them into a kind of like what we use as a sense of belonging, I guess. So, I mean, how do you manage that, I guess?
Good question. So in the first few weeks, for example, normally there will be time for tutors to do ice-breaking activities to get to know the students, to know your cohort, those 20 or 30 students in each tutorial sessions. To do an online poll could be one option to understand the backgrounds of your students. I would also basically during the break or when we're having before we're having assignments or when we do tutorial talks, I will always go around or in the tutorial rooms to have a chat with either them as a group or student as individual to get to know them. Is there any questions, is there any problems, is there anything that you feel like or not feeling like, or is there anything that you feel I'm doing way too quick, too fast for you to understand? So I would like to always get a response and feedback along the way. And that's the same for me to do the online tutorials as well. We have breakout rooms, so I will always go in to have a chat with students, so treat them as individuals, and basically because every student, or essentially every groups of students, there will be different challenges, different needs that we need to address as tutors. So more diverse, a understanding of the diverse needs, I guess it helps me at least to address those diverse requirements. I hope that.
No, thank you. That's a great unpacking of what it is you do.
And Karen, I was just going to suggest that the strategy that Hui suggested there about getting to know his students and letting them get to know him is a really positive step in building up that relationship between tutor and student. And it makes the students feel much more comfortable and at ease and more willing to approach Hui to ask extra questions or look for assistance. So I think that's a really good move, Hui.
Sure, thanks.
Yes, you can. Whoever that was. Diane?
This is Beatrice. Yeah, that's right. I'd like to ask a question for Hui, especially during your trying the ice-breaking time when you just try to have in-person engagement with the student. What about there is this dominant student pop up and start to carry the attention of all the group or you away from the main topic and start, for example, talking about a minute or just couldn't stop talking. So what is your strategy of managing the time?
That's a good question. From time to time, there could be difficult situations that require tutors to basically take some actions. Firstly, I would from my point of view, the bottom line is it's good that students want to speak up. It's good that they want to either ideally it's content related. It's related to the concept, the terms, the knowledge that we're talking about in the tutorials. But if it's getting too long, rambling for a while, more than 2 minutes, I would say we could keep this dialogue conversation later on when we have a break. But let's keep going on the tutorial content as we need to. There are a few tasks or there are a few activities we need to get to as a cohort in a tutorial. But I would always, I won't take it as a negative. But yes, there should be strategies and actions being taken, because as a tutor, time management and address and deliver contents to the 30 students entirely is a major, I guess, task for tutors to do. Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we move on to Lisa?
Hey. So, hi, everyone. One of the things that I guess I really wanted to start with was that, my pedagogical focus, I guess, has always been to focus students on co-creation and sort of peer-to-peer learning. So one of the things that is really important for me is to break down that hierarchy between teacher and student. And one of the things I thought I'd talk about was one of the undergraduate courses that I teach into, which is communications, media and identity, which is ComU 2150, because it has a really high percentage of students in there who have English as an additional language. And many of them kind of come from quite a traditional, conservative learning background. So they have a really strong distinction and hierarchical distinction between teachers and students. And one of the things that I've found over the time that I've been tutoring is that the more you break that down, the more you have peer-to-peer learning in your room, the more engaged students tend to be in this kind of work. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was using generative AI in the classroom. So with this particular course, we allow students to use generative AI in their assessments because we're teaching into digital cultures. So, they need to use digital technologies. So one of the things that I try to do really early on is to really empower students to understand that they have a high degree of expertise in this space, and that it's perfectly acceptable and it's awesome if they bring that to the table. So a lot of them use these technologies in terms of their daily lives, but they also use them in their learning. But what most of them don't do is think about them critically and understand where they come from. So what I do with these ones in the classroom is invite them, when we're doing group work and things like that, is to invite them to say, hey, if you want another student in your group, open up your favorite generative AI and treat them like they're another student. So ask them the same questions, take what they're saying and try to digest it, question it, think about it. And this is really important. And I've learned this over the last couple of years as these technologies are exploding, is that students need to become comfortable in questioning what these technologies are telling them and how they're engaging with them. So this has been a really great way to create some really interesting conversations. And just in terms of that response that Hui had before about, students getting off track and that sort of thing, that happens a lot when you take this approach, but I love it because it means that the room is really animated. The students talk a lot. They often get really loud, which from my perspective is fantastic because it means that they're really engaged with the content. You do have to cut them off sometimes and bring the class back down again. but it means that students are really questioning what it is that they're talking about. They're taking the content and really thinking critically about it. And this is, to me, I found is really important because I get to learn how they use the technologies. They get to learn about some of the content. So it really becomes a very much of a dialogue in the classroom, which from my perspective is great because it really does empower students to ask questions, to question their own thinking, to question my thinking, to question even the resources that we're using, and to take a wider view of what it is that we're actually talking about in terms of content in the classroom as well. So I guess from my perspective, that idea of, that breaking down those barriers is really important to both my style, but also my thinking in terms of how students need to develop professionally, because they need to be developing that confidence to question and to think deeply and to think critically about what's happening around them, both in the room and also to look at their world outside as well. So, so I guess that sort of peer-to-peer learning and that sort of co-creation of thinking is really important to the way that I approach that the classroom in that regards as well. So yeah, that was just a little example, I guess, of one of the things that I think is really critically important as we're moving forward as, I guess, as teachers, but also as learners as well in the classroom. So that's me.
Thank you, Lisa. I love that. well, because everybody's spending enormous amounts of time thinking about how do we make Gen AI a thing that we use and that as a tool, but without losing. I mean, unfortunately, the university sometimes goes down the academic integrity path, and it sees it as in the negative. Exactly, you shall not use, and so I like the way of that kind of that really not. I was going to use the word casual, but deliberately casual injection of that space, and treating it as another student. I think is a great way because we're always discerning about what other students say and what everybody says. And so, yes, I think it's a lovely way to think about it. Is there anybody who wanted to jump in with any questions? Peter, is there anything that you wanted to ask? Is there anybody in chat that wants to jump in on chat?
No, there's some positive comments there for what Lisa's doing. And there's two. There's a bit about AI from Hoy as well, that students need to critically examine the content from Gen AI. And that's something that we all know, but it's difficult to implement sometimes because we do have this barrier between good teaching and the use of generative AI at this stage, because so many people are just learning as much at the time as students are about the use of generative AI. And yes, the university does have a three-step process for its use in assessment, and most of our teachers have chosen the first option, which is it's not to be used. And that doesn't mean we don't encourage it to be used in class or in the student's own learning, but people still have that barrier there about using it in assessment because I don't know, we're all still on this big learning curve.
Yeah, and, it's so true.
And we need to know that the work that students hand in for their assessment is their own work, even if it was informed by generative AI. And we're still at that place where we're trying to distinguish between the two and work out where we're headed for the future. So brave steps that you're taking there, Lisa, and it's really good to see that students are using it in class. That's to be encouraged, I would think.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've learned in doing it this way too is that because we have gone down the path with this course of saying, okay, you can use it, but you have to use it critically. You have to tell us how you used it, why you've used it, what you've used, what you've discarded, and it's almost like if they choose to use it, it's almost twice the content that they have to write for it. But it sets up a framework for some of them where they are really afraid of using it. And it almost like it forces them underground. And I don't think that that's what we want to do with our students. I think we want to make them brave when they use this technology, but to use it openly and to really understand that this is not, it's not an answer. It's a way to augment your own thinking. So, yeah, so to put that power back in them, I think is really important.
Right, and we're not going to be able to go back. The genie's out of the bottle.
It certainly is.
Need to know how to work with the genie, I think.
Yeah.
And all of our graduates are going to be working in situations where Gen AI will be part of their everyday professional life, I imagine, within a few years.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, especially in that communications and com arts sort of space. I think that that's a really important thing. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I think there's a conversation we could keep having, but we've just got a small amount of time. So I'd like to introduce to Usra, and over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Yusra, and I am tutoring at the School of Chemistry. I did pop a question in the chat if anyone is tutoring labs. I can kind of talk a bit more on that. But if no one is, I can focus a bit on the other things. So I am a final year student, and I'm working on gold nanoparticles. And why I've put that is also important because sometimes the students want to know about you. And the way you can inspire students is also by telling them what you do. So whatever you are doing, apart from your tutoring, it's good to tell them that, oh, this is what I'm studying, or this is what I work on in the lab especially. So that's something where it's like a conversation that, we were talking about getting to know your students and, having that kind of conversation. So that's very helpful. Karen, if you could go to the next one. So, yeah, so what I do is, that's me in the lab. So I am tutoring second year chemistry courses. We've got labs in both of the modules. So in one of the sessions, I'm the only tutor there. So I'm basically running the whole show. And one of them, we've got our co-tutors there as well. And I also run workshops. So basically workshops are where they're solving problem-based questions. And so that's a big room. And we're kind of helping them through their, thinking process and how they kind of get to solve their assessments and those kind of things. Karen, can you go forward, please? So I thought I'll just give you a few points to how you can have a successful tutoring session, even if it looks like a disaster. We'll talk about 3 points. If you can have the first point. So if you just Google how to do a successful tutoring or teaching, you'll have preparation and planning. And you can think of how you're going to do that. But what I'll tell you is it gives you, the reason why you need to do that is it gives you confidence. Now, and you need to balance how much time and effort you need to put into it, because you will never have all the answers. There will always be one student who will ask a question which you don't know. And there's no harm in saying, I don't know, or I'll check it for you. I'll get back to you. It just shows that, yes, we are also learning. And it helps in you having the smooth execution of your tutorial. So try to think of what could be the most common questions. You can discuss with other tutors who have, kind of tutored this course before, or the course coordinators, because it's always helpful to have an idea of what are those bottlenecks, especially during experiments, because we have a very limited time and we need to know that this is the point where most of the students get stuck. That's what helps as well. And can we have the next one? So sometimes we do the experiments by ourselves before. So this is one of the experiments that we do where we have the effect of pH and we can see the different colors forming. I personally love this experiment because of the beautiful colors. But when I do this beforehand, I have an idea of what colors to expect. And then when I can see a student who is struggling, I can help them. And instead of them right at the end finding out that they've done something wrong, it just helps me to kind of, streamline what they're doing. We can have the next point. The second thing I want to talk about is communication and student engagement. We've spoken about this before as well, but we need to make sure that the students approach you, because many of them, they're in the classroom for the sake of being there. Because they're second year undergrad students, they have to pass the course, they have to attend the lab sessions. So you want them to feel comfortable, you want them to approach you and, kind of think. So there was, initially when we had that poll, someone had mentioned about, should we be firm, should we be strict or friendly? And if I answered that, I would say you will know how to tackle the student. So on a default, you should be friendly, approachable, because the firmness usually comes from course coordinators or lecturers as well. So they look at tutors a bit, more approachable. They're still somewhat our level as well. So, but if you see someone who's taking advantage, that you always find one student who is always go like, he'll be just putting his hand up all the time. Like, now what do I do? Now what do I do? Sometimes you have to tell them, read the instructions. So you don't want to be rolled on, because you always say you can be helpful, but you need to know how much to help them as well. And sometimes we are a bit, we're a bit hasty as well. We want to give them the answer, but we need to let them think. So that's what I focus on a lot. I try to give them examples. Like we've got one thermodynamic experiment where they're using hair dryers to kind of heat up elastic bands to see, how they stretch and those kind of things. It's basically evaporation and those things. So I try to relate those concepts to things that they experience in their daily life. For example, when you're wet, you feel colder because the water is evaporating. So they always remember those things. So it's helpful if you can think of examples in your daily lives and you can relate it to those, especially in the context of, chemistry. They think like, oh, this is just for the labs, not something that we can relate it to our lives. That's helpful. And I feel like we need to guide the students to think to reach the answers. We don't tell them straightforward, oh, okay, he's struggling. We say, okay, no, this is the answer. So try to give them those guiding points and try to make them use their critical thinking and to achieve what they need to reach. But there's always a limit. We have time constrictions. So if you really feel someone is struggling, then you tell them, okay, right, this is how you do it. But especially when they're handling instruments and those kind of things, it's just helpful to let them explore a bit. And the final point that I'll talk about for these is feedback. So I believe Hui also talked a little bit about feedback. Sometimes it's something like, well done, or do you want to try again? So you're just kind of giving them this idea that, oh, I'm doing something correct. I should go ahead. Or you can tell them, oh, you finished it before anyone else. So these little small victories that, we like to kind of celebrate within that session or lab is very useful. And of course, some of you who are working in labs, safety is very important. And that comes through setting an example. Now, if I'm not wearing my safety goggles or I haven't buttoned up my lab coat, I'm not setting up a good example. So we need to make sure, and then we don't want to kind of put them in a spot as well. So we need to especially when they're new, they've never worked in a lab before, we want them to feel comfortable. And at times it's just highlighting the importance, like why should I button it up? It's the same thing. Or why should I be wearing safety glasses? Or why should I tie my hair up? So these are small things, but it just helps in making things comfortable for the students. So that's what I feel like it's important to think about these things. The next slide, rather the last slide. So my advice to all of you, including myself, would be keep on learning because there's a lot of professional development courses. There's GTA course, the Graduate Teaching Associate. It really helps you to identify your learning and teaching strategy and the different pedagogies that are followed in your discipline. Always be open to feedback, whether it's from students, your peers, or your staff. Sometimes, if you feel like you're noticing something, you can have a meeting with your course coordinator and tell them, I feel that they lack this kind of thing, or maybe this module, there's some issue with this, because you're the one who's having the most interaction within that space. So feel free to talk to others about it and to learn for yourself as well. Be critical. Yeah, that's important because they are looking up to you. They won't be critical to you, but you need to be critical to yourself. and celebrate your achievements. So if you feel like you had a very good session, go treat yourself. Normally I finish around 5 p.m. so I just buy a juice on the way back. I was like, I spent too much time, and I kind of put in a lot of effort. So do these small things, and when you keep up with this, you get recognition from your students. So, and then eventually you get recognition from your school as well. So that is one of the picture I have from the SCMB Tutor Awards. So it's kind of all a cascading thing. It starts up from preparation, and then eventually you end up there. So I just wanted to give a few tips. Feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you as well. That was lovely.
Could I just jump in there for a moment,
yes,
Karen?
Yeah, sure.
Yusra, I loved how you focused on preparation. It's preparation, preparation, preparation. That is the key to success, I think. But also when you talked about that incidental feedback that you give to your students when you're walking around that class, I think that's so valuable to them. It gives them feedback on the work they're doing, but it also makes them feel part of the class and develops that sense of belonging. So well done, you.
Thank you.
We might just, I'm just aware of timing. What I might do is we might just go to Natalie now, and then we'll have a bit of time at the end to have a nice, larger chat. So, Natalie, did you want to share, or you were just going to talk? Did you send me slides?
I did send you a slide, but I can
sorry.
just...
Yeah, maybe I think I've missed it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize.
Did you want me to share it for you?
You just share. That would be lovely. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Technical difficulties, people, they happen all the time.
Okay. This is really going to test my...
share just down the bottom, nice green button. Are you right? Do you want me to... I'll see if I can find it.
What is going on here? It's saying that my...
Hang on.
I'm more interested in those notes behind you.
I know.
Well, this is my thesis.
Yeah.
It's looking good.
Hopefully you can decipher it for me.
Yeah.
Coming along well.
It's just saying that my... accessibility, perhaps. Sorry, I just got a new computer and it's a bit difficult. Really.
I will. We'll just my comment.
Hey, have I done it?
Nearly. Keep going.
No, I don't. No, it's not letting me. I'm so sorry.
Are you using a Mac?
Well, how about do you? Because I can't find them in my. Did you send them by email?
Yes, I did email it to you this morning.
You said are you using a Mac?
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened to me the other day. Yeah, I know that. And eventually it will ask you to close and restart Zoom.
Great.
Okay.
That's not happening.
Okay. Can you, how about let's just work.
Would you like me to re-email it?
Yeah, if you re-email it, and while we're doing that, you can...
Look at this problem solving in action, everyone.
Yeah, that's exactly. And so, the thing about when you are tutoring and when you're lecturing, these things happen. And so we need to I always try and be take it easy on myself if things go wrong technically, you just go, take a deep breath because you're not the first person that's ever happened to. So
okay, it's all sent to you now, Karen.
Perfect. Okay, so if you make a start and I will put that up.
Of course. Okay, so kia ora koutou, everyone. My name is Natalie. I'm a PhD candidate within the School of Social Science, and I teach exclusively within the criminology discipline. My approach to teaching is fundamentally shaped by my own experiences as a survivor of both domestic and sexual violence, and in particular, the way that those experiences influenced how I was able to engage with my studies as an undergraduate. Because more often than not, I had an intimate understanding of a lot of the concepts that we were discussing in class, but I found that within academia, there is a tendency to discuss traumatic experiences and difficult concepts as though they are some sort of far removed, far away entity. Yay! Some far removed, far away entity that couldn't have possibly ever impacted any of our students. And I think the most recent statistics suggest that approximately 75% of all university students have experienced at least one traumatic event in their life. So this just simply isn't the case. And I found it to be disempowering and very isolating. So I always try to emulate the sorts of behaviors and characteristics that I needed as an undergraduate. And I needed someone who was approachable, who gave me the tools to start to think outside the box, and who provided a space for me to realize the validity of my own ideas. And at the core of all of these different moving pieces is the absolute necessity of providing a safe space for my students to learn. And I consistently cultivate this safe space throughout the semester, but it begins from the very first moment that I walk into our first tutorial. And I always open my first class by going on a little bit of a diatribe about my own personal experiences, and I am very transparent about them. Not to sensationalize experiences of crime or to sort of shock my students into feeling a particular way, but to humanize these experiences and also to allow them to then understand how they shape how I will then interact with them as individuals. And I find that this moment of vulnerability and transparency, it provides the most wonderful opportunity and platform for me to genuinely connect with my students, because I'm demonstrating to them that I trust them with this material and that I have confidence in them as students to be able to engage with these tricky topics. And so once I build upon that, I am incredibly explicit, almost to a juvenile point of explaining how I conduct my classrooms so that none of my students ever feel like they don't know what to expect. Because there are a few times in my undergrad where I felt like I was being interrogated and I never felt like I learned anything in those sorts of classrooms. So I'm always very clear with my students and I give them permission. I give my students permission to ask questions, to be curious, to get excited, to challenge the ideas that we're discussing within the social sciences, particularly within criminology. A lot of the ideas that we're discussing are archaic. I want them to feel comfortable to challenge those things. I also want them to feel comfortable to disagree with me. I have a lot of radical ideas. If you look at my PhD, I'm looking at I critique to dismantle, to imagine new ways of responding to violence. So I want them to know that they can say, Natalie, like, what are you talking about? Like, you're completely out of line here. I want them to always feel safe to be able to push back. And to echo some of the points that have been said before, I give them the space to know that they can make mistakes, because I think we forget that making mistakes are an integral part of the learning process, and there's absolutely no shame in being able to admit that you don't know or that you don't understand something. And in doing that, out of self-interest a little bit, it also provides them potentially with the skills to be able to extend that same kindness to me on the off chance that there's something that I don't know or I don't understand throughout the semester. So I suppose to then sort of operationalize that safe space and that safe environment, I rely upon these 4 things that I've listed here. So first and foremost, I just interact with the world in a way that is trauma-informed. And so that really is just to say that I am intentional with the way that I move through the world as to not cause harm to other people. Because as researchers, we have a responsibility to not cause harm. And I think that that responsibility should absolutely extend into our classrooms as well. And then to build upon that, I always provide my students the space to feel. And this, I find the students love this. It's really engaging. And the reason that I do this is because the world is a mess, quite frankly. And I can't imagine being an undergraduate student interacting with my studies with the sort of the totality of everything that the world is at the moment. It must be so incredibly daunting. And so I provide my students the space to feel upset, to get angry, to be sad, to feel joyful if they feel joyful about things, because I think it's important that we give them that space. And as I said, it is incredibly engaging. They do really like it. And particularly within the sort of space that I work in, there is so much to be angry about. So I really find that it facilitates the conversation and it gets them engaged. And then that builds into my third point, which is I always encourage my students to think outside the box. And I find that sort of gut instincts and emotions are a really good spot, particularly for first years, to get them to start thinking critically, because they're developing their self-awareness, they're developing their emotional intelligence, and they're developing their capacity to think critically about things. And that in and of itself, I think, just provides the most amazing foundation for our students to think outside the box. It also helps that my sort of lens of the world is pretty outside the box as well. So I'm always pushing back against things that we take for granted in particular. And then finally, I'm always centering my students, and I find this really engaging and it encourages them. And one really good example that I have that I think is highly transferable across a majority of disciplines is a writing activity that I came up with a couple of years ago, because I recognize that, like, when we teach first years, we have to teach them the structure, the mechanics of writing, how to evidence, how to cite, but we're not actually teaching them about the act itself. And I love writing. I find it the most delicious labor of love. And I wanted that joy to translate for my students. But it's just sort of, writing is this nebulous thing that we don't talk about. So I asked all of my students, like, what is your ideal writing environment? And I got them to think about their five senses, like the time of day that it is, if they're with other people, if they're alone, if they have a coffee, a tea, what are they listening to? And they were chatting and coming up with all of these really exciting strategies that they were going to use when they were writing their assignments. And it just created the most amazing, it was a really, really warm and engaging class. And they were all feeding off each other and building these sort of strategies to assist them in their writing. So that's my general approach to teaching. I hope that it is useful. And I'm really excited for you all to start teaching or to continue teaching, because it is truly one of the purest joys, I find.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Natalie. I think having kind of set your place in your context, particularly, I think it's obviously an amazing experience probably being in your tutorials for everyone.
I hope so.
What I wanted to we're kind of running a little bit out of time. So I've got a couple of questions. We've got a bit of time for a last couple of questions. Is there anybody want to jump in and ask a question around anything that we've talked about today, or of any of our tutors that we've got here while they're here? The thing is that there are lots of, as you go forward, there are lots of ways, there are lots of different places you can seek support through, like, the Central Teaching and Learning, like in Italy, but there's also each of your faculties in your schools also provide support as well as reaching out to, and what I feel about having this kind of community, almost like a community of tutors, is that you can reach out across the disciplines, across the schools, to have a chat with each other, to talk about, what we've learned today, or what what you might be experiencing in the future. So just as we finish off, I'm just going to jump back into, give me 2 seconds.
Can I answer this question?
Yes, you can indeed. Go for that.
Caddy, great question. So I always provide sort of a content warning via email if there is even the potential that we are going to discuss difficult topics in class. But I also, in my first class, I explained that experiences of violence aren't unique and they're not restricted to interpersonal violence. It can be structural, like poverty. It can be due to discrimination, all of these sorts of things. And that it is our responsibility as people just in a classroom environment to interact with other people with a sort of respectful lens. So I always emphasize the fact that it is important that we talk about these topics, but I also say to my students, if you don't feel comfortable, please come to me. And I think that's why being approachable is so important to me, because I want them to know that they can always come to me. And on the chances, because I have had students in the past who have said to me that they didn't feel comfortable with particular topics, and I'll either walk through the content with them or I will work with them to ensure that I'm presenting it in a way that is safe for them to be in the class. And just to sort of remove all of those hierarchies and to make sure that they can still engage in a way that is important and meaningful for them in particular.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question for help?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a situation when you have an interaction with a student and one of the maybe a bit dominant or overconfident student, and he just during the process of interaction, he actually reads some wrong information, and then because he's loud and then the wrong information goes wrong. So at this moment, if I as a tutor, if I stopped him, and then the wrong information might stay with the student. However, if I try to correct or provide some other complementary information, that would sound like an argument. And however, if I let him go, and then that would be this doesn't sound very correct. So it's kind of like a catch-22 situation. So I would like to ask if any of the tutors may have some good idea dealing with this kind of things, whether it should be an immediate stop or argument, or just let him finish his sentence, which is the wrong information.
Would anybody like to jump in with that one?
It sounds like a very difficult situation. That's what I have encountered.
Yeah, no, and that's what we. I mean, certainly, you obviously were the person that put in. How do we deal with difficult situations and conversations?
Yeah, because at that time I realized that his information is seriously wrong. It has something to do with the assessment. It's just his way of dealing with the theory. And then, so I stopped him, but I correct him. However, at that moment, I realized quite a lot of other students, because he already got a round of interaction for this kind of issue, which means he already spoke a bit. And then with me jumping in to correct the wrong information and make all the other students just waiting, feel like they don't have the time. They got deprived of their right to engage or to interact or something. I feel, oh, maybe that's not a good idea. But then with the retrospect, I was thinking, okay, what kind of good idea be? And if I just stop him immediately, and then the wrong information may sink in the head of the student. So I was, very difficult for me to handle it.
Do you want to have a? Oh,
yeah. I just so you tend to come across such students, and at times you really can't continue discussion in front of everyone else, or so you can always either tell them, we can talk about it at the end of the class, or we can talk about it later, or you can always say that, okay, if you think if it's out of your hand in terms of respect to those things, you can also always refer them to the course coordinator, or otherwise you can kind of have them separate, and because yes, at times they think that they know more, or those kind of things. So don't be too harsh on yourself. Just kind of break it up for a bit, and then you can talk to other students, and then you can go back to them later. That's a kind of I've had some of the students like that as well, and in fact, trust me, even course coordinators and lecturers had issues because they always kept on repeating that kind of an attitude. So then, yeah, you got to stop it somewhere.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one question in the chat. Kyra asked about what does centering the students mean? When you said, I think, Natalie, was it centering?
Centering the students. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think for this, it's just particularly, I mean, because for me, when I came to start to begin to scaffold my own critical thinking ability, I found it really hard to do it like anybody else. And I think critical thinking is an incredibly subjective process. So I'm always teaching my students to center their own experiences and their own views. And so we always discuss, like, one of the questions that I pose to my students is, do you think that the society that you're part of is fair? And any single range of the students in my classrooms will answer that question in a different way, but it also provides them the opportunity to interrogate why they have that particular view. And so it's the same with another example I can give is a very hot topic in the criminological sphere at the moment is youth crime. And children are the easiest subgroup of our population to demonize because they don't have access to power in the same way that adults do. And I encourage my students, when we're thinking critically about policies and the way that we respond to young people, I say, like, what were you like as a child? Like, go back to what you were like when you were 12, 13, 14 years old. Like, how was your relationship with your family? What were you like in school? Just so that they can center themselves in the problems that we're discussing so that they can then start to understand and unpack it. I think that that's an easier way for particularly first years who are the dominant students that I work with, for them to start to understand the larger issues that we are confronting.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Adawa?
Just very quickly, for us, when we were doing the course in public health on the social determinants of health, we actually have a game where we, because we are talking to future medical students, we actually have an icebreaker where people take different roles in authority, and some of them end up being the patients. So they actually see things from the perspective of the patient and not necessarily from them as providers. I think that really grounds people, because then they actually now start understanding that before I'm actually wearing my white coat, I'm a human being and I need to relate to these people as a human, and that I should feel like they feel. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with that in terms of being able to direct students or assist them in actually looking at how, something that might be a nebulous theory when you're talking about it in the classroom, but what it actually looks like in their own lives. And that's like, talking about gender performativity, and it's like, well, look at your social media feed, open it right now, look at it, see it through different eyes. Look at the world around you. Look at that building over there. See it through different eyes. All of those sorts of things, and actually grounding them in their own lives, I think is a really important thing when you're talking about some of the, especially really complex or emotionally complex issues with students as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think we've definitely come past the end of our time together, but I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. I'd particularly like to thank Lisa, Natalie, Hui, and Yusra for joining us and sharing. And I think each of their contexts, I think, is important kind of to recognise that each of our tutors today are coming from different spaces and so forth, and they have obviously many different ways of working with their students. But I think a couple of there's a few things, and I think that this is I've just got this on this last slide around kind of general kind of things that you might like to think about when you are working in either your first tutorial or your 167th tutorial. There's kind of the messages that we've heard today, I think, are important in each of those spaces. just before we absolutely finish off, if you'd like to give us any feedback, that would be great in the chat. I will share with you this Padlet. Now, there was a question about where you can get professional learning after this space. Then this Padlet has a number of different spaces and places that you can get. I'll just show it to you what it looks like. Okay, so places that you can go, and I will share this PowerPoint with you as well. But so technical support, learning design support, and professional development. And this is the area you can see on this side of career development and the things that people had recommended, that Yusra was recommending that you keep on learning as you go through.